Okay, good afternoon. So, welcome to the new Maps to Marks initiative. So, largely we'll be covering the map work from a purely prelims point of view, which is for the upcoming prelims. So, we won't be going into details of complete details. Only we'll be covering the major parts, especially the places in news, which has been in news from past 6 months or past 1 year. So, we're trying to cover thematic wise. Thematic wise means first Latin America, then Africa, then we have Eurasia in that regard, which includes West Asia. Then lastly, Central Asia and Southeast Asia part. So in this, what are the important ones which is in news? So if you see one, Venezuela has been in news. One of the reason being that Indian government has increased its oil purchase from Venezuela. One reason is that. Second reason also it was in news is that Venezuela has went through an economic crisis. So in this perspective, if they ask from a map point of view, what can be asked? One, as you can see, Venezuela, where it is located, South America. And you can say the South American continent, you have the Andes mountains which passes through, right? So they might ask a question saying that which of the following countries passes through the Andes mountains. So you can keep a code such as EV-CAB-C, okay? So E for Ecuador, V for Venezuela, C for Colombia, A for Argentina, then you have Bolivia, and you have Chile. So these are the countries through which the Andes mountains passes through. So code you can keep as what? EV-CAB-C. Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. And you can see Andes mountains, it comes on which part of the continent? It comes on the western part in that regard. So that is what you have to keep in your mind. And second thing they can also ask, which is the highest mountain peak in Andes? It is Mount Aconcagua, which comes in Argentina in that regard. So that is one more point you have to remember. Which is the highest point in this thing? Andes, it is Mount Aconcagua. And technically, which is the highest or the tallest mountain range in the world? It is the Himalayas. Okay. So Andes is not taller than Himalayas. So these are the basic points that you need to keep in your mind. And South America is a continent. You can say that on the west side, it has South Pacific Ocean. There it has North Atlantic Ocean. And you have here South Atlantic Ocean. So map work is that whenever you find some place in news in that regard, just go for the major ones. Not in extreme details, might be not asked. So remember this. India is purchasing oil from Venezuela, and recently there was also an economic crisis in Venezuela. And you can say that these are the countries: Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. And which is the highest mountain peak? Mount Aconcagua. So if you take, keeping with Venezuela itself, in the South America, there is a region called as Gran Chaco. Okay, so in prelims they can ask where this Gran Chaco. It comes in South America. So you can say which are the countries which come in this Gran Chaco region. You have 4 countries, that is the eastern Bolivia, western Paraguay, northern Argentina, and the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso. So you don't need to take the western eastern part, but remember the countries: Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and you have Brazil. And this Grand Chaco is also called as the hunting land in that regard, because it is rich in biodiversity, etc. And you can see hunting activities are more here. That is why it is also called as the hunting land. So in prelims they can ask Grand Chaco, it comes in which region? North America, South America, Africa, Eurasia. The answer will be what? The answer will be South America. And which are the countries that are covered? Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and you have Brazil in that regard. Or they can also ask Mato Grosso. This region comes where? It comes in Brazil in that regard. So remaining with the same thing, this region, South America, this is important. Gran Chaco. Taken now? We'll move on to the next one. So one more question they can ask in South America itself is that the equator passes through which countries in South America? You have 3 countries: Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil. Okay, so you can see Ecuador comes here in the westernmost part of it. Then you have Colombia, then you have Brazil. These are the 3 countries which. So Ecuador does not pass through Venezuela. Okay, it is only Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil in that regard. So this is the line through which Ecuador passes through. Now, since we had discussed about what the oil purchase in that regard, So we will also, they can see, if you see last year's paper, they also asked who is the largest producer of cobalt in the world, etc. So there might be a question, who is the world's biggest oil producer? So don't need to remember all, but remember the first three, three largest. United States of America, followed by Saudi Arabia, and third you have Russia. So these are Guyana and Venezuela. And you can see the Escubo, it comes here on, what you can say, the western part of the, okay, and why there is a dispute over this region, why both countries want, because it is rich in oil resources in there. So one common thing you can say, wherever there's a dispute, right, a dispute will be one for resource or it will be have a strategic importance to it. Nobody is going to fight over a land which is of no use. So usually wherever you see disputes, it will be either for strategic purpose or it is for resource, etc. So remember Escubo, which is there. So what they can also do is that they won't ask individually. This is we are doing individually. In exam, what they can do, they can ask following regions are in dispute in regard, match the following. So there you'll have to know which has come in which region. Now there was one more thing of oil spill which had happened very close to this Venezuela in that regard. So that happened where? It happened near this place here, which is called as Columbus Channel. Okay, this Columbus Channel is also, okay, Trinidad is the southern part of the island. So Serpent Mounts comes where? It is between Trinidad and Venezuela. It is also called as Columbus Channel. That is one more thing you have to keep in your mind. Why it was in news? Because there was an oil spill in that regard last year. Now slightly moving ahead, you have this thing was in news called as Darian Gap. So this was a region where you can say a lot of people who are trying to migrate from South America into United States of America. And this region is a very marshy region, and you know, for example, it is a very arduous journey, very difficult to pass through, and a lot of people have lost their lives. And here you have illegal, what you can say, migration happening, and you have many organizations which are involved in systematic crime. So this was in news last year. So they can ask, Darian Gap is between which two countries? It is between Panama and Colombia. So that you have to remember. It is between which two countries? Panama and Colombia. And you also can say that this, what is a Darian Gap. There is also national park, and it is also World Heritage Site declared by UNESCO. That is also you have to remember. It's a national park as well as it's a World Heritage Site. So why this route is famous is that many people have to go through this region to enter America. And why they go to America? Obviously, it is pull and push factor in terms of migration, and many people have lost their lives because it's a very difficult journey which they can do. So please remember, it's also a national park and it is also World Heritage Site. So who declares World Heritage Site? UNESCO. Same thing when you read the Indian part, you have to know which are the important World Heritage Sites in India. And I think there is only one World Heritage Site which is both has a natural and man-made feature in India, which is that it is Kanchenjunga and Sikkim. Okay. Now next, moving on to a bit of Africa. So if you see, Sudan has been in news for various reasons because a civil war is going on. So two things you need to remember here. You can see Sudan, as you know, it comes in Africa. Which part of Africa? It comes on the eastern part of Africa. So the countries which are bordering Sudan, if you look at, we have Egypt, we have Libya, we have Chad, we have Central African Republic, and you can see Sudan, we have South Sudan. South Sudan is a separate country. Sudan is a separate country in that regard. And you have Ethiopia and you have Eritrea. So here you don't need to note down all the bordering countries there, just given an idea. But why this was in news, they might ask Rapid Support Forces, RSF. They can ask they are operating in which country. It's a rebel force. It is operating in Sudan. And now there is a civil war. What do you mean by civil war? A war happening between the Sudan military and this particular group. So when this particular group was found, they were found of a one more rebel group called as Janjaweed. Okay, Janjaweed, they were a group. They split out of this group and they became Rapid Security Forces. So this is a pro-Arab force. What do you mean by that? This force usually attacked the non-Arabs which are living in this particular region. And now they've separated out as a separate group called as Rapid Support Force. So one of the reasons why you have to know this, they might ask about Hamas, they might ask about Houthis, they might ask about what you can say, Hezbollah. So they might ask which region they come. So remember, rapid support force. There is something called as rapid facility, that is different. This is a force, rapid support force. They operate where? They operate in Sudan. Options they might give: Sudan, South Sudan, very closely. It is not South Sudan, it is Sudan. Okay, and remember the Sudan's map in that regard. It comes where? It comes very close to Red Sea. If you see, Sudan touches Red Sea in that regard. South Sudan is landlocked. Okay, South Sudan does not touch Red Sea. It is only Sudan which touches Red Sea. Red Sea will do later, which countries will come. And please remember, it separated out of what? A rebel group called as Janjaweed. Now, moving on to the next thing. Nile River has been in news. Okay, one, because there's a dispute over a dam which is being constructed by Ethiopia. We'll come to the dispute later. But when you look at Nile River, so you can see here, you have Blue Nile, White Nile, and both of them are merging in Sudan. That is Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. And then it flows towards and it enters Mediterranean Sea. As you know, Nile is the longest river in the world. And if you look at here, one of the questions they have asked in CDS exam, not UPSC exam, they have asked here is that among the two tributaries, which is longer? Okay, so please remember, White Nile is a longer tributary than the Blue Nile. That is one important point you have to know. And second one, they might ask this White Nile, it arises in which country? It arises in a country called as Burundi. Please remember, White Nile arises where? Burundi, and it is longer than Blue Nile. And Blue Nile, it arises from where? It arises from a lake called as Tana Lake. Okay, where is this Tana Lake? Ethiopia. So this is also one of the question they have asked, not in UPSC, but CDS, CRPF question. Please remember, the source of White Nile is what? Burundi. That's a country. Where does Blue Nile arise? Ethiopia. Tana Lake in that regard. And both Blue Nile and White Nile, they'll merge where? Here you can see. Where does this come? Khartoum. That is the capital of Sudan. Okay. Not South Sudan, Sudan. Understood? So this is also one of the questions they can ask. Where does the blue line and the white line merge? At Khartoum, that is in Sudan. And where does the Nile finally flow into? Mediterranean Sea. And please remember, White Nile tributary is longer than Blue Nile. To Lake Victoria. It comes where? Senegal. And where is Senegal? Western part of Africa. Here you can see, this is Senegal, and the capital of Senegal is Dakar. You know, it is Dakar. It's a lake with high salt content. Pink lake. Where does it come? Senegal. Now, if you see, there is a alliance has been formed in Africa between three countries, that is called as the Alliance of the Sahel States in that regard. So which are the three countries? Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali. You can see Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso. And all three countries were part of ECOWAS. ECOWAS is what? A Western African security grouping in that regard. But all three of them quit ECOWAS in that regard. And now they formed an independent alliance that is only called as Alliance of Sahel States. And one more thing is that now Burkina Faso, which is there, it has now surpassed Afghanistan as the number one country with victim of terrorism in that regard. Okay, Burkina Faso has surpassed Afghanistan as what? Number one country as a victim of terrorism. So ECOWAS, remember, ECOWAS is coming out a group of 15 countries which were there of Western African countries. So these three countries separated from ECOWAS, they formed their own group called as the Alliance of Sahel States. Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali. Now Africa has been in news for various reasons, conflict, coup which has recently happened. So some places which are in news or cities which are in news, you have to know. So one you can say, Darfur, where does it come? Sudan. Okay. Tigray, where does it come? Ethiopia. This is also a previous year question they've asked. North Kivu and Ituri, where does it come? Democratic Republic of Congo. So remember, Darfur, Sudan, Tigray, Ethiopia, North Kivu and Ituri, Democratic Republic of Congo. Then you have this region called as Ambazonia. It comes where? Cameroon. Okay, these are all match the following questions that can be asked. Then Tripoli, where does it come? Libya in that regard. And you have recently Russia signed an agreement to construct the nuclear power plant in Egypt. And what is the name of the nuclear plant? Daba nuclear plant. Similarly, they can also say Fordo is a nuclear plant. Where does it come? If anybody can tell, Fordo. Recently, it is also in news. Fordo nuclear plant. Where does it come? Anybody? Make a logical guess also if you are not able to predict. Fordo nuclear power plant. It is Iran. Iran which is in use now. So it comes in Iran. Fordo. F-O-R-D-O. Fordo. Please remember this is Dava nuclear power plant. It comes where? Egypt. And who is building the nuclear power plant there? The Russians in that regard. And you have Abai, A-B-Y-E-I. Okay, this region is a dispute between which two countries? North Sudan and South Sudan. So please remember these names. Darfur, Sudan, Tigray, Ethiopia, North Kivu and Ituri. It comes in what? Democratic Republic of Congo. Ambazonia, Cameroon. And you have Tripoli, Libya. Daba nuclear plant. Where it comes? Egypt. Who is building the nuclear plant? Russians in that regard. And you have Abai is a disputed region between what? North Sudan and South Sudan. Even if you don't know the reasons of dispute and all, it's fine. But largely have an idea where there is a civil war, where there is a coup, where there is famine in that regard. These kind of questions have been appearing in recent times. Now, since we saw in Africa, there is coup happening, there is a lot of civil war happening. So obviously there are a lot of groups which are very active in this region. We have to know which group is operating from which region. So you have Al-Shabaab. It's a terror group which operates from where? Somalia. Okay. So where does Somalia come? You can see Horn of Africa in that regard. Somalia. Al-Shabaab. Then you have Boko Haram. They operate where? Nigeria. So Boko Haram recently had kidnapped schoolgirls in that regard, and it was, back then also it was in news in that regard. Boko Haram, Nigeria. Then you have this thing, AQIM. So AQIM, what is the full name? Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb. It comes in Algeria. Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb. It comes in what? Algeria. Okay, Maghreb is a region. It covers different countries that we'll do later. But this group where it is operating from? Algeria. Then you have Al-Hijra. They operate from Kenya. Al-Hijra. They operate from Kenya. So I have an idea. Kenya, Somalia, Egypt, you can see Libya. Libya comes where? North Africa. Tunisia comes North Africa. You have Egypt, Somalia, Kenya all come under eastern part of Africa. Here if you see Algeria, Mali, Nigeria, they all come under the western part. Okay, so these are the different groups in Africa which are operating. Since there are a lot of lakes also in Africa, so what are the important lakes in Africa? So you have Lake Kariba. It is located in Zambia. Lake Kariba, Zambia. Then you have Lake Malawi, where it is located? 3 countries, Malawi, Mozambique and Tanzania. Lake Malawi, it is located in Malawi, Mozambique and Tanzania. Then you have Lake Mevru, which is located between Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. Lake Mevru, Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. Then you have Lake Tanganyika. It is located between 3 countries, Tanzania, Zaire and Zambia. So you can see a lot of countries are repeating. That is why you have to be conscious where it comes. Kariba is where? Zambia. You have Lake Malawi, Mozambique and Tanzania. Then you have Lake Mevru. So these are the certain things you have to remember. But here the number of questions what will come is very rare in that regard. And even if they ask, if you're able to remember, you can recall. Otherwise, it's all difficult to recall these type of. Okay, they're a rebellion group. Where they're operating from, and who is supporting this group, rebel group 23? They're supported by Rwanda.